Kenya is set to host the first Africa Digital Finance Summit themed Decentralized Finance, or Pathway to Financial Freedom, will bring together governments, central banks across Africa, startups, professionals, and decision makers across the world in the financial, economic, technology, and blockchain industry to deliberate and forge a pathway towards the future of finance in Africa. But we'd like to understand how decentralized finance is the pathway to financial freedom and what the future of finance in Africa is really like. We're joined by Mary Njoki, who is the CEO of Glasshouse PR, a public relations agency which is organizing the inaugural Africa Digital Finance Summit. Mary, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Fine, happy to have you around. Let's start by understanding this term, decentralized finance. What are we talking about?
I think we'll just start by defining the word decentralized.
Yes.
Because when we talk about decentralized, it's about systems that are not controlled by any central organizations, like the way we have central banks, we have other organizations that are controlling certain industries. So when we talk about decentralized finance, it's where the finance has gotten out of its traditional way, where everything about finance is controlled by central banks or controlled by any other form of bank, but it's now distributed to different people, and it gives power back to our people. So the conversation around DeFi is where power is given back to our people, and now it's no longer centralized. People can now be able to have their own freedom and control how they do their value exchange.
Yes, I like the way you say it, that decentralized finance is the pathway to financial freedom. You like to think that we are there as an economy in Africa, that we're taking steps to getting there.
I don't think we are yet there, but what I like taking, or how I liked us discussing, is going back to when we used to have barter trade.
Yes.
Remember the days of barter trade, where I'd come with my shoe, you'd come with your shirt, and we'd exchange. I feel like decentralized finance, or DeFi, and the future of finance, when you talk about the blockchain and everything that comes with it, gives back power to our people, where peer-to-peer, when we can come and peer-to-peer can be able to exchange value in a way that is not being controlled by anyone. Of course, the introduction of fiat currencies introduced us to a global market, which is also very, it's key that, fiat currency came. But I think for us to be able to achieve that which we need, or rather achieve financial freedom per se in that way, depending on how now we're going to define what financial freedom is, I feel like when we go back to a place where the community is given back the power, where peer and peer can, exchange value, there's more freedom and power that comes with it.
All right. Now, we do expect to see this Digital Finance Summit on 18th and 19th of February 2021.
Yes.
What do we expect? What is going to be the biggest discussion around this summit, Mary?
I think the reason I came up with this, as the one who is a visionary, was to bring. There's been a lot of fights between people who are in blockchain and people who are and the central banks and governments and startups, everyone.
Yes.
I think first of all, we need to understand what PR represents. I think public relations is supposed to shape the conversations of the future. So the reason we came up with this, and the reason we've created this platform, it's to bring these people together. And number one, create understanding. What we noticed over the last few years, how blockchain was introduced to the Kenyan market or to the African market. People were told blockchain is about getting rich quickly, or it's about mining, just some funny things. And I'm not even talking about investment, etc. And for me, I'm coming on board to be able to enlighten Africans, to tell them, this can be a form of value exchange. Number one, understand this is how it works. And then remember, like in Kenya, we have M-Pesa. We are privileged to have M-Pesa. And if you travel around, you discover that, we are actually a privileged people in Kenya. So we came up with M-Pesa as Kenya, as this land. And everyone else has been trying to copy what we did with M-Pesa. So how can we then have this summit in this country, talk about, help people understand about what has been happening, then talk about the different solutions that we have in Kenya, like M-Pesa, and then from there we can now say what is the future of finance in Africa. So I don't necessarily have the answers. We all have the answers. We come together and we say, we are not saying blockchain or cryptocurrencies, that's the solution for Africa. That's not necessarily what we're coming to say. We are saying we are Africans, we are innovators, this is what is happening, this is what has worked. How can we come together and create a pathway towards the future of finance? Having government, having the central banks, having this people in blockchain industry, because we'll keep ignoring them, but the industry is growing. Right now, I think Bitcoin is at $42,000, by last night.
Yes.
So it's happening. We cannot ignore it. So how can, instead of fighting and we keep writing, letters like 2 days ago, the Central Bank of Nigeria wrote a letter to the blockchain and cryptocurrency companies, and they warn the public about cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Why don't we make the people understand, number one, and then stop fighting them, and then we come together and say what's the future of finance? Let's agree. Let's see how we can help our people. Let's see how we can give back power to the people.
There's a thin line, Mary, especially when we're talking about what would be the future of decentralized finance. Let me take you back to exactly what is happening in the country right now. That for us, the biggest shift that we've seen is under digital finance. And now when we're talking about the cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies that are in the country, there's that special part that comes in, Mary, regulation, which we do know is good for even when we're talking about decentralized finance as well. We have to also talk about that side as well. Are we running away from regulation when we're saying that this is decentralized? Where is the line?
That's a very good question. I think when you talk about decentralized, it's more of the people have the power, but then it can be, that's the reason we are bringing the central banks. And I've heard in other countries, like central banks have come up with their own cryptocurrencies. They're calling them the cryptocurrencies, they're central bank cryptocurrencies. I think it's more of not having one organization regulate or have power over people. It's about having several organizations control what is happening. For example, when you talk about a devolved system, which is also decentralized, we are now in a devolved system in Kenya, where we are no longer operating directly to the central government. We have the county government. So that's how I'm looking at how finance should be. Of course, there's a lot of it's new. It's a new terminology. It's new in Africa. So there's a lot of evolvement that will happen over time. But I think we are headed somewhere, and we should create room, at least, to see what happens, rather than just keep fighting. And I think people fought M-Pesa. It's the same thing. Banks fought M-Pesa. Everyone was fighting M-Pesa, and at least it was not too late. So I think for now we should not be fighting cryptocurrencies or fighting blockchain. I think we should make people understand, because there's a lot of miseducation out there. A lot of miseducation, and there are people who have been conned, and that's where I'm starting. I'm saying, let's educate our people. This is what is happening. We cannot ignore digital finance. This is decentralized finance. This is what is happening. Okay, how do we, work with our people now towards the future of finance? How will it look like?
Yes. Maybe somebody's going to ask you the question as well. But let's talk about our local economy here. Everybody says that, we are making advancements to what would be a middle income economy by 2030. Fine. But what would you say is the biggest impediment here locally towards decentralized finance?
As I've said, it's number one, miseducation.
Yes.
I feel like there's not enough education in that regard.
Yes.
And definitely people perish because of lack of knowledge. So the people who know this lack of knowledge have taken advantage of our people. And therefore, there's a lot of, I've heard many stories where people have been conned, their monies have been embezzled. Like there are many conversations around that. So people are even, when they hear blockchain, they run away because they don't even understand what it's all about. So for me, it goes back to ignorance, miseducation, and that's where I am. Like, let's educate our people, and then from there, let's come together. I mean, we are brilliant minds. Like, I mean, we came up with M-Pesa, so there's so much more we can come up with in Africa.
Let's talk about that specific one and blockchain and cryptocurrencies. You can't look at it on just a single best approach where you're saying here in Kenya. You've got to look at it across the board as well, because it's not just a currency that we say just exists in the country only. Do you believe that it has to be a concerted effort from other economies as well for us to achieve that decentralized nature of that finance even here locally?
I think so, but I also think we need to understand our role as Kenyans and as Africans.
Yes.
We spearhead things. For a long time, we used to do what the Western culture is doing, but I feel and I know a time for Africa has come for Africa to arise. So even when we're having this conversation, understanding that it's time for Africa to arise. Let the ball shift. Let them come to Africa or to Kenya to see how things are done. So I mean, I was in a conference 6 years ago, and I remember talking about M-Pesa, and this guy was so amazed, and he said, "Wow, these people are a decade ahead than us in terms of mobile money." And I'm like, we always think the Western culture is way ahead, but we are way ahead. I mean, when I feel like I'm doing an advert for M-Pesa. Anyway, moving on. But I think there's so much that we carry, and that's why I'm like, let's bring this conversation to Africa. Is that what they're doing in the West in terms of blockchain and cryptocurrencies? Yeah. But I think the solutions are here, and we can shift the economy of Africa. I know that's it's a long one, but it's possible because of who we are. Yeah.
Pretty much. All right, let's therefore talk about this summit that is on the 18th and 19th of February 2021. Who do we expect to see there? And what are these lead conversation points that we expect to form the center stage?
So we expect to see government representatives. We expect to see I wanted to say central bank. They sent me a letter. They said they're not coming. We expect to see thought leaders across the world who have been in this industry for quite a while, from the US, from the UK, from South Africa, Nigeria, everywhere. And some of the lead conversations, we want to, number one, redefine what is value exchange. We want to discuss exactly what is blockchain, what are cryptocurrencies, what are stable coins, all those conversations. And then we want to see how does, entrepreneurship come in, the conversation we were having earlier. So how does this the future of finance, how does it bridge the gap between the poor and the rich? What are the effects of, the introduction of fiat currencies? How do they affect, how we are from barter trade? How do we ought to be in the future? What are these platforms that they can use now? What are the innovations that are coming out of Africa?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me take you back to something that you've just said right now that is also might form a conversation this morning, Mary. That concerted effort, that willingness to participate, that willingness to recognize that we actually need to have this conversation. Well, Central Bank of Kenya has written a letter to you saying that we might not be there. Is that where we start lose it as an economy in terms of accepting this sort of conversations?
Yes, I agree, and I may agree because maybe I'm the one organizing the event. I think we start losing when we when we ignore things that are happening and then they blow up, and then we want to be part of them when they are bigger, or we want to be part of them when we are sure. And I've had conversation like with central banks over and over, and there's a way the argument makes sense, but for me, I'm like, let's educate our people, because the time is coming where you will also do what you call central bank cryptocurrencies, but we need to educate our people. People are being called, like there's so much that is happening, there's so much ignorance. Come, let's educate our people, then we talk about regulation, and all that. So I think people are ignoring it, but they will not ignore it further, because a lot is happening.
Yes, yeah. I'm going to come back on that regulation aspect, but talk to me, other than the Central Bank of Kenya, which has really turned you down, what is the sort of mood from the other people that you're calling on board to come participate in the summit?
I think people are very excited, especially people from the West. Of course, going back to Africa is the next frontier. Everyone knows Africa is rising. So you can see how people are excited to see, wow, blockchain is now in Africa. So people are really excited. And there are many brewing conversation underground. So for us to be bold enough to bring it on the forefront, everyone is like, wow, okay, we want to see how this is going to happen. The different government representatives we've invited, they're very, much interested and much excited about it. So it's bold to come up with this, because people are having conversation. I'll say in Kenya we say chini ya maji, so we brought it on top of the water. So let's see how it is. So people are excited to see it.
Yes. Lastly, therefore, this morning, Njoki, even as we talk about this conversation, now, when we come to regulation in the country and anything that touches on a digital, there's this conversation that digital moves very fast, to the point that even the regulators in these various industries and sectors, they find that they are left behind. They start to understand it once the movement is already taking shape. And then after that, you find that you're getting pegged back, as opposed to being part and parcel of this evolution that we're seeing in digital. Case in point, even the digital lenders in the country, now we do know they cannot be able to even blacklist anybody, because, they evolved so fast that even the Central Bank of Kenya didn't have any sort of regulation draft to regulate them. Is now they're trying to get back and come up with it. Do you think that that is the biggest impediment, especially to African economies and sub-Saharan economies, to the point that, most of the times we find that we are left behind? Or that's a general trend when you introduce the word digital?
I think it's a general trend when you introduce the word digital. I agree with you, because you cannot predict how the next innovation will look like.
Yes.
But I also feel like the governments and the central bank, they need to stop slacking behind. They need to be ahead of their game, because they need, and I keep going back to, we need to understand who we are as Africans. So even the governments need to be ahead of their game. These stories for the 1990s, if they need to end, they need to be ahead of their game. They need to know this and this. But of course, there's a place of learning, because they can't predict the next innovation, but they need to maybe have the smart people, these innovators. I don't know who they employ. Maybe they need to employ these innovators to just help them, predict and be able to transition quickly and catch up with everything that is happening. Yeah.
Pretty much, Njoki, let's clear it like this. Should I want to participate? How can I participate in the summit?
To participate, you just need to log into www.adfs.africa, and then there's a page written there, register. So you just need to register and you'll get a ticket and join us.
Pretty much. Mary Njoki, CEO Glasshouse PR, thank you very much for taking your time this morning to speak to Metropole Television.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. On that note, we take a short break, but once we come back, top on our plate on our economic review, Safaricom 36 bulb or shillings in terms of the share price. What is behind that biggest ever jump in their share price? And also, what could be the magic bullet in ending the assaults that we've seen in our boarding schools in the country here on Business App.